Hi, I'm Sam Keeley. I work in the U.S. Senate, and on the side, I co-run AFP 548 along with Nate Walk. Today, we're going to talk about security on the Mac. The Macintosh is inherently a secure platform, being a Unix platform, but there's a lot of issues that you need to look at when you're in an enterprise environment. So there's a lot we're going to talk about today, but we're going to start with a warning. IT security, it's a game of compromises. There's no such thing as a secure system or a fully secure system. You can do a lot to make the system more secure, but really all you could do is continue playing the game. It's a cat and mouse game, and you'll have some successes, you'll have some losses, but ultimately, if you follow good practices, you'll succeed, and you won't run into as many issues as if you leave the defaults and everything. So let's take a look back to Apple's security marketing page from 2005. Now we can see here that the focus then, it was on viruses. Back then there really wasn't a lot of Mac malware, if there was any. So the big focus was on viruses. There was still XP days, so that was the contention. There just weren't enough Macs in high places for them to be worth exploiting. But let's look at it today. Today, it's a lot more different of a focus. It's about protecting you from malicious things, because Apple acknowledges that there is malware on the Mac. And there's new features like Gatekeeper and sandboxing, and those are great. They keep you a lot more secure, but they're very consumer focused. But let's look deeper into what those features are. We're going to start off with sandboxing, which I would say is the most important feature, especially in the enterprise, because the other ones are a lot more consumer focused. So what is sandboxing? It limits access for applications to the file system and its resources. So an application you can't just open an application and have it go out and dump your entire user folder and upload it to some server somewhere. Now, it's required for all App Store applications, but if you just download some random application off the internet, it can still dump everything and send it off somewhere. So it's great that Apple requires this now, but just downloading something from somewhere doesn't mean that you're not going to run into that issue. So the way it works is that applications only have access to a small container, and anything outside of that has to be granted to it. Now, the most common thing you run into is file access. So in any old application, it could just open the file however it wanted to. But today, the only way for a sandboxed application to access those files is through Apple's APIs, like the open file dialog or drag and drop, or through commands from the operating system. And when it gets those files, it may not even know where they actually are. So you might be opening something in your desktop, but the OS is going to tell it where it says it is, which may not be on the desktop. It could be anywhere. And really the biggest thing and the biggest challenge is that applications now can't communicate with each other through Apple events. So that's a big limit, but the kind of applications that you would want that do those kinds of things aren't usually what would be on the App Store. So the second big security feature, which is part of Mountain Lion, and most of these features are part of Lion and Snow Leopard too, but really the focus is on Mountain Lion these days. So it's Gatekeeper. And what is Gatekeeper? Now, it's a protection from applications that are downloaded directly from the internet. Now, when you download an application through Safari, Chrome, Firefox, some metadata gets added to the file. It's just an attribute, and it says, hey, I was downloaded from the internet. and it says when it was downloaded and where it was downloaded from. So when you open it up, it's going to warn you and say it was downloaded from the internet. And additionally, if the application is not signed by an Apple developer ID, it will warn you about that too. And if the Gatekeeper settings are the default, it will not let you open that application if it's not signed. So this is what you'll typically see if you try and open an application that's not signed. It'll say it can't be opened. So it's really easy to get around that. You can either change the settings in System Preferences, or you just right-click the file and open it. And then you'll see something like this. It'll give you the same warning, but it'll let you open it. And it's ultimately the same thing. So this is what you'll see if the application is signed, but you downloaded it from the internet. And it's just all warnings to protect you, but this doesn't apply if the application is sideloaded. It only applies if it's downloaded from, through a web browser, which in an enterprise environment, that's really not how things get loaded. So Gatekeeper is very important, but it's not a big thing outside of the consumer space. It's good if your users are downloading applications, but other than that, it's not going to do very much for you. So the other big feature is FileVault 2. Now, I'm not going to claim to be an expert on this. If you want to know everything about FileVault 2, go ask Rich Troughton. But what it is full disk encryption for everything, your entire drive, using AES cryptography. It's basically uncrackable, and it's great for one-to-one deployments because it's really easy for the user as you just log in with your login credentials and it'll unlock the drive. But because of that, it's not so great for shared environments, for example, a lab, or if people are sharing computers, things like that. Because if you have a lab, only really the local administrator account or someone else who has previously been added to the FileVault unlock group and had their credentials stored in FileVault will be able to unlock the drive and boot the machine. So I would definitely look into FileVault 2 if you have notebooks, things going out in a one-to-one deployment, but otherwise it's going to be a real challenge. So there's been a lot of talk about XProtect recently because of what is it, what it does, and the challenges that it's brought in enterprise environments recently. Now, XProtect is really two things. The first is malware protection that's built into the operating system. And the way it works is it contains signatures for known malware, like Mac Defender, Flashback, common things like that. Everybody's heard about them. They were all over the news because the first Mac virus ever, which really wasn't true, but things like that could get blown out of proportion. So that's the first part of XProtect. The second part of XProtect, which affects enterprise environments more, are the plugin version checks. So it contains versions for Flash Player and Java, and says this is the minimum version that I'm going to let run in Safari and other web browsers that hook into XProtect. And if the installed version you have doesn't meet that version, it's not going to run. So it updates every day from Apple. When Adobe comes out with a critical security fix for Flash, Apple's going to get that updated pretty quickly, and it's going to turn things off. So let's just have a little look at XProtect. So the first part of XProtect is the malware protection here, and we can see that it's a XML file, and it has signatures for a couple of pieces of malware here, and the operating system will scan those files and see that they're malware and protect you from them. It's sort of antivirus, but it's not manageable or anything like that. It's a great feature, but it's it's great that it's there, but you need more than that. So then the other part of XProtect is the XProtect meta.plist, and this contains the plugin versions. Now you can see here, what you really want to look at are the last two entries in here. This I grabbed last week, and it requires, 11.6, 602.171 for Flash Player, and then Java 7 Update 21, which are the minimum versions. At this point, the 11.6 update for Flash was, I want to say, 3 versions old, but that Java version is the current version. As soon as Oracle has a new version of Java out, that is updated, and sometimes even before it comes out. So there's a lot of common ways for malware to get into the operating system. The Mac OS it's very secure by itself, but, we like to install these things that aren't very secure on it. Like Java, Acrobat, and Flash. Now, 2 of these are Adobe products. And, I don't have any problems with Adobe, but, these are, the thing with these 3 things are that they're common software that exists on Windows and on the Mac. And so when there are exploits found in Java, they're probably going to affect you, whether you're on Windows or on the Mac. Same thing with Acrobat, same thing with Flash Player. So, if you are a malware writer, you're going to look for the easiest way to get into as many machines as you can. And this software affects it. So, what I see a lot of are PDF exploits, and I use antivirus to catch them. Now, I'm not going to claim that any antivirus is great on the Mac. They're all pretty okay. A lot of enterprises, schools still don't run any antivirus on their Macs. They certainly do on Windows, but still not on the Mac because, you still look back to 2005 and there's no viruses on the Mac, so what do I need antivirus for? So I've used quite a few of these products. Again, none of them are really great, but if you have a site license or something like that for your Windows machines to have antivirus, pick that vendor. It probably isn't going to cost you very much, if anything, to get them on your Macs. And install their managed client. It's going to find things. And it will surprise you that it finds things, but it will. It might just be, PDF attachments in someone's mail folder, but they will be there. So, once you have that taken care of, it's time to talk about administrative rights. So many people, so many, environments end up with users having admin rights. And, what are they? They allow full unrestricted access to the machine with just a password. You might not think that it allows, everything, but as soon as that password is put in, whether it's a package, something else, it's full root access. It can do whatever it wants to. And once users have them, it's really hard to take them away. So, who needs them? Nobody. I just want to raise your hand if users in your environment have admin rights, local admin rights. Raise your hand if you run with local admin rights. I don't want to see any of those hands up. So what are some common needs for admin rights? There's package installation, updates, running Apple software update, installing Solitaire from the App Store, installing printers, either in your work environment or at home, changing the energy saver settings, changing network settings if you go home, if you go to a conference, something like that, especially if the Wi-Fi is not so good. And then changing the date and time. So, we can deal with those package installation and Apple software updates through a managed update solution, whether it's Casper, Monkey, Absolute. They all work. Pick one, use it. It's great. But, beyond that, there's so many more issues. I just got here, and my computer's stuck on Chicago time, but I'm in Pennsylvania, and I don't have admin rights, so I have to live with this time. It's only an hour different. But if I go fly around the world, I'm going to have to, think about the time on my computer. It's 8 hours off. What am I going to do? My admin, he put my computer in high performance mode and made the display go to sleep after 2 minutes. I'm sick of that. I want to get good battery life, and I want to let the display stay on for more than 2 minutes. That's just ridiculous. But, as soon as I click that lock, I get this thing. And now I'm stuck. So I go bother him, and he gets really mad at me, and it's like, fine. And then, if I'm halfway around the world, you call your sysadmin and say, hey, I need this password. They're not going to give it to you. So ultimately what happens is your users end up with admin rights because they need them. So what are the risks of that? There's malware, there's general malware, whether that's, Mac Defender or things like that. And there's targeted malware. It's not too hard to construct a page that says, you need this plugin, and I can make a package and sign it with my Apple ID and only send it out to a couple people. Apple's never going to catch that and turn it off. And I'm going to, have it pretend to be a Flash player update. But it's also going to make me an account and, enable phoning home and give me full access to your computer. There's unlicensed and unregulated software installs. People love to, just download pirated software and install it on whatever machine they have. If they want to use Photoshop and they have admin rights, they're going to find it and they're going to install it. Accidental tweaks, people think they know what they're doing, but they do something and it just screws everything up. You got your malicious users who want to, they're kind of like the people who make the accidental tweaks. They think they know more than they do, but they're trying to get something out of it. And then, they'll just disable your management software. So, I can install management software on my machine, but if my users have admin rights, what good is it if it could just stop working at some point because they don't like it? So how do we give users rights that they need without giving them the entire keys to the castle? That's Etsy authorization. Now, what is Etsy authorization? It's a configuration file. It's checked by the admin framework for elevated privileges. Every time you enter an admin password into your machine, it is looking at that file and saying, hey, do I have the rights to do this? Or what rights do I need to do it? Now, you probably think that it's some crazy Unix configuration file being in Etsy, but really it's just a plist. So it's XML, it's easy to edit, and it's pretty easy to read too, though it is a pretty long file. So you open it up, it's XML, right at the top, it tells you, how to work with it, things like that. You scroll down, you will see keys like this. Now, this is the key for Energy Saver. And this is what you can see in the comment there. It says, check by the admin framework when making changes to the Energy Saver preference pane. And we can see down in the second to last key, the group is admin. So you have to be an admin to have that right. If we look here, we can see the different keys and what they do. So allow root's the first key. That is almost always true. And that allows users, or that allows root to use that without any kind of authorization. Now, if you're root, you can already do whatever you want, so fine. Class is typically what we're going to be working with giving users rights to do things. We're going to be working with the user class because they're a user, that's how it's checking. Then we have the comment, it tells you what it is, but it's not used by anything. We have the default button, which is, it's an array of strings by language, and it'll say, you know, unlock or allow or authorize or whatever it is. Again, it's just, it doesn't really matter what it is. It's just a GUI element. Same thing with the default prompt. When that box pops up and says, this application is trying to use this, enter your password to continue, that's what is there. So you can edit that if you want to, but I don't. So what we really want to look at is the key group. Now, for most of these things, the default is admin, and that's fine. We could just change that to everyone and let everyone do that, but I don't think you really want to do that, whether you have students or interns or things like that. And then printer stuff is usually LP admin, which is a group that admin is already a member of, but it has some other rights. So then we have the last one, which is shared, which means if that is true, when you unlock that pref pane, it will unlock every other pref pane for you until you quit system preferences. It's nice. You know, I usually leave it as true just because if someone already has access to it, you just don't want to get in their way. So we go back here, you know, we want to edit that group, and what, you know, this is for energy saver, but what else can we do? Well, we want to make a power users group. Now, most people that make these changes, you know, they call it a power users group, which is a term that's totally stolen from Windows XP, but it's a really good term because some users should have additional rights, while others really don't need them. So let's create this group. We do it in the command line, just ds edit group. We're going to create the group, call it power users. The name in quotes is what it will show up as in the GUI. And power users is the actual name to the computer. Now we're going to add a user to this group. In this example, we have a user called teacher, who we want to be able to have some more rights. But don't forget to add the administrators group to this group, because if you don't do that, only the power users that you add directly will be able to do anything. So what can we do with Etsy authorization? Now, there's a whole bunch of keys that you probably would want to change. You know, we have our energy saver, which we already looked at. System.preferences.network, which lets you change settings for, you know, your network. This is something that I probably would not set on a desktop machine, but if I'm sending somebody out with a notebook, and they're going to end up at, again, a conference center with lovely Wi-Fi, and they need to change some settings, then they should probably have that. Without this, you'll be able to connect to Wi-Fi networks and things like that, but if you need to change the IP address or something like that, you'll need this. System.preferences.date and time.change time zone. Now, this is one that I really like. It's not actually in Etsy authorization anymore. Apple stopped supporting it in 10.4. If you Google this, you will land on an Apple knowledge base article that is archived from 10.4. This is not in Etsy authorization anymore, but if you add it, it still works, and it's great. Because, you know, if you're using directory services or something, you want people to be able to change the time zone, but you don't want them to change the time. Because, you know, I've had users that say to me, you know, I want the time on my computer to be 10 minutes fast, so I never miss a meeting. Well, that breaks Active Directory. Thank you. So, system.preferences.printing. You know, if you want users to be able to add printers when they go home, things like that, and maybe change printer settings, then they need this. They also need to be a member of the LP admin group to actually add the printers. This will just give them access to the pref pane. We've got system.preferences.software update, so they can run the software update application or through the App Store. Now, in my environment, I have all the software updates go through Monkey, but this is nice because users will still click the Apple menu and go to software update, and then they'll freak out because they need an admin password. So if they click that and then it just says no updates available or something like that, then it's a better user experience. Now this is one of my favorite ones, is system.shutdown and system.restart. You know, on Windows, you can, if you're at the login window or you're any logged in user, by default, you can restart that machine. It'll give you a warning that says other users are logged in with fast user switching, and it might cause them to lose data, but you can restart the machine. Now, by default on the Mac, you can't do that, and that's a problem because, you know, if you have a shared machine with a whole bunch of students, you know, fast user switching, you should some people leave it enabled. I do, because people share their machines. And then they need to restart it to install updates or something like that. And then they're stuck because they need an admin password. So if you set these, if you are logged in, it'll ask you for your password. When you try and restart it with other users logged in, if you're at the login window, you can just straight up do it. So it can cause some issues of people that don't save documents, but that might just be their own problem. System.print operator. This is another one that I would definitely set and give to everyone. In a lot of environments, when you have network printers, they will just become paused. I don't really know why it happens, but it happens often enough that you'll be running around because I can't print because this printer is paused. And this will allow people to unpause and unpause printers, as well as delete print jobs from other users that might be jamming up a printer. Like if someone logged in and printed this giant PDF that's just filling up the printer memory, and it'll try and reprint it every time it gets canceled, someone else can now log into that machine, delete that job, and just take care of it. Now here's some other settings that exist, but proceed with caution. System.device.dvd.setRegion.initial. Now, I don't know what a DVD drive is anymore, but this used to be very useful because when you deployed machines, you would have to run around with a DVD and stick it in and set the DVD region, and that was just no fun. So this setting will allow users to set that DVD region, but it won't allow them to change it. System.preferences.datetime. This is the one that is still in Etsy authorization by default, and if you give them this right, they can change the time on the machine. They can change the time zone, they can change everything. And again, they will break Active Directory, and that is bad. System.preferences.timemachine. This one's probably not as bad, but if your users want to take their machine home and back it up on Time Machine or something like that, then they can have this. System.preferences.startup disk. I would definitely not give them this one. System.install.app store software. I think this is more of one that IT shouldn't be deciding, but if, you know, users demand that they be able to install games from the App Store, they can do that with this key. It won't allow them to install any other applications, though. And then system.preferences.sharing, if they want to enable file sharing or something like that. I mean, again, this is something I would not give to users because then they can disable remote management. So, you know, they're all there, so watch out for that. So how do we modify Etsy authorization? Now you're going to use a command called plistbuddy. Now, even though this is a plist, most people will commonly use defaults, but defaults can't write to nested XML plists. So back it up first. If you screw this file up, it will mess up your machine, and you probably won't even be able to boot it. So here's an example. We want to give the power users group access to, I believe it's Energy Saver, yes. So we're going to use plistbuddy. It's got some kind of bizarre command. I have to look this up every time I write this command or just copy an old one. But it goes writes system.preferences, Energy Saver, and it's just going through the nested XML. And we're going to set that group, which is a string, to power users. Now, let's say we want to give everyone access to something. It's just the same command, but this one we want to give them print.operator and give that to the group everyone. So basically the same command. You can also allow nobody access. Now say I want to give nobody access to the time machine. I can just say group nobody because nobody is a group on OS 10. But this one is kind of pointless because if you're an admin, you could just rerun this. But it's something that's useful. It's kind of funny because when you do this, it'll say, and you try to open that pref pane, it'll say, please enter the password for somebody in the nobody group. So, going back to this, when we modify etc authorization, we can turn this into this. And now I can change the time. And this is not an admin account. Interestingly, for this one, it will still show the lock as set because that's for the entire pref pane. It's just opening up that one tab. So let's have a demo of this. Here I have a virtual machine. I've got 3 users on it, student, sysadmin, and teacher. So we're going to go into that sysadmin account. The password is password.
Oh, no.
All right, so here I have, I'm using payload-free packages to open it. This file is just the post-flight for the first package there. So let's have a look at it. This one's pretty simple. It just creates the power users group, adds the admin group to the group power users, and then adds the teacher to the power users group. So let's install that package. And now we can go into System Preferences and see that this group has been created with teacher and administrators in it. Now you won't see that Systems Admin is part of the group, but because it's a part of the administrators group, it inherits that group. So we have this second file here, which modifies etc authorization. Now in this example, I give access to system.restart, system.shutdown, changing the time zone, being part of the print operator group, running software update, the network preferences, energy saver, and time machine. It's got all these commands, and then I just ensure permissions at the bottom. It should be root wheel and 644. So we'll install that. So now, I'm going to change here. I'm going to go into the teacher account. And we can see that the time on this machine is 2:30. Now, I really want to change that because it's throwing me off by an hour. So I am going to go into date and time. Yeah. Go to time zone, and now I can change the time zone to Eastern time. I'm an unprivileged user. I'm standard user account, and I'm able to change that. I can go into Time Machine. I could turn on Time Machine, select the backup disk. See, it's already open for me. I can. What else did I do? I'm sorry. Oh, I have printers. Yeah, sorry. So I can add printers. So you also have to add them to the LP admin group, which is part of the third script there. But it will allow them to add and delete printers. If you are using managed printers like through Monkey or something, and you want those printers to remain on the machine, you can use an install check script to check for the name of the printer in case they're deleting printers that you want on there. The one thing you need to look out for with printers is that drivers still need to be there, and they won't be able to install those. So I would just say either install Gutenprint drivers or install HP, Lexmark, and Canon drivers. That'll cover 95% of printers, and if you still have users whining, you can deal with it then. So I still have that sysadmin account logged in, but I want to restart this computer. Now, previously, if I had tried to do this, it would say enter an administrator's password, and then you'll be able to restart. Well, now I just enter my password, and I restart the machine. So that is the demo of Etsy authorization. There is one more thing. And that is single user mode. Now just raise your hand if you know what single user mode is or have ever used it. Now it's great for fixing things, isn't it? But it's also not that good to have on there because it gives you full root access to the machine. It's enabled by default on every Mac. If I went around to this room, I'm sure I could have root on more than half of the machines within a minute. And all you need is physical access to the machine, a couple minutes, and holding down Command S at boot. You can also enable it through NVRAM commands, but if you are able to execute those commands, you already have admin rights, so I'm just going to disregard that for now. So let's have a demo of what we can do with that. We're going to go back to that same virtual machine. I'm going to restart it, and I'm going to hold down Command S. Now here is single user mode booting up. I'm going to hack into this machine right now. So I am going to mount the drive. The commands are right there. And then I'm going to remove a file. I'm going to remove vardb Apple setup done. And what this file is it tells the operating system that the setup assistant has been completed. So we're going to remove that file. And then we're going to exit. I actually have to exit full screen because VMware and single user mode are odd. So we're going to restart and then go back to full screen. So this machine's going to start up now. And apparently it didn't work. That's too bad. There is another way to break into this machine, though. This is the problem with live demos. I'm sorry. I'll try it one more time. But so there are other things we can do. So basically, what would have happened if that had worked is that the setup assistant that runs when you open any brand new Mac would open, and it would have you go through the registration steps, which you just skip. It takes a minute, and then it has you create an account, which is a full admin account, and then you have full admin rights to the entire machine. You could have done whatever you wanted to at the command line there, but the problem, or really, when you are breaking into a machine, it's a fight with time. That's the fastest way to break into a machine. You could start Open Directory, run DSCL, change the password to local admin, or create an account, do all that stuff, but that just takes too long. So that's the easiest way to do it. So here's everything we could do. You could use DSCL, create and modify accounts, change passwords. Most managed clients run with launch D, launch control, so we can just disable those. Install some software. It might make accounts. It might be some malware. It might just, turn on SSH access, or, install a launch daemon that runs periodically and downloads a script from my server and does whatever I want it to. Or we can just remove that Apple setup done file, which is the easiest thing to do and works most of the time. So we want to get rid of single user mode, or at least disable it. So Apple has an officially sanctioned way, actually two ways to do this. The first way is the EFI password. Now, it's Apple sanctioned, and it also disables boot from external drives. It disables verbose, booting into verbose mode, single user mode, everything like that. And it's secure on 2011 and later Macs. If you set the password on, your brand new MacBook Air, it's going to work great. There's no way to disable that easily without calling Apple and having them go through their crypto, whatever they do through TSPS. But the problem is it's really easily disabled on pre-2011 Macs. And all you really need to do is just pull out a stick of memory, boot the machine, and that password is gone. And then you get right into single user mode. But setting a firmware password still is something that is very useful. Most users aren't going to be able to pull out a stick of memory, and you can't even do it on any MacBook Airs, so those, I guess, are secure, even if they're the old ones. So how do we do that? You could run around with the firmware password utility, boot up from the old DVD or whatever, and just run it, but that's going to take a very long time if you have more than a couple Macs. So the firmware password utility is in the OS X installer, but we want to pull out the command line tool to set the firmware password. So we're going to download the OS X Mountain Lion installer, and inside that application is the install ESD disk image. You've probably used this if you've wanted to put that on a flash drive or something. So we're going to open that up, and then you now have a volume, an OS X install ESD, and then you have the base system disk image, which is what actually runs when you're running the OS X installer. So we're going to go even further into that and go into this applications, utilities, firmware password utility, pull out this set reg prop tool. And this is the tool that actually can set firmware passwords. This is what the command is to set a password that will allow booting, but will not allow alternative booting, whether that be to an external drive or into single user mode, verbose mode, whichever. It will require a password for that. You can also set a firmware password to just boot the machine at all, but I don't think that's very useful these days. And you can easily embed this binary, just the binary itself, into a payload-free package and deploy it through Casper, Monkey, whichever, or have it be part of your imaging workflow. So, what if we get through that firmware password and we're able to boot up into single user mode? Well, we want to disable that or make it very hard to use. So when you log into single user mode, you are root. And in Unix, when you boot as a user, it'll automatically load their profile. So we want to set that root profile to automatically exit single user mode. So that file is var root.profile. So we just want to add a couple lines to it. First one we're going to add nvram boot args, and we're going to make that blank. So it's going to clear those boot arguments. So if someone's previously set single user mode to be on, something like that, it's just going to get rid of that. And then the second one is this if command. So when you are in a terminal or any command line, there's different forms of it. The form that you are in single user mode is VT100. So we're going to check that. And if it is that, which it isn't if you're in terminal on in the actual OS, then we're just going to reboot the machine. And that's it. So that's going to destroy single user mode. That we can actually demo. If this has rebooted by now. Thank you, Fusion. That's what the secret last package on there is. This Should boot up in just a second. So we're going to go into the systems administrator account. And we're going to look at this file, hopefully. All right, so this one's pretty easy. We're just going to echo those two commands into the root profile. Pretty simple. So we're just going to install this secret package here. It was secret because it was the one more thing. So we're going to close. And now when we try and restart, today, once we get into single user mode, it'll automatically just restart the machine, and it's pretty funny when it happens. All right, there we go. So here's single user mode. I think I'm going to get root right now. I'm going to own this machine. I'm going to have full root access. But then this happens. I've been thwarted. So I think that's pretty cool. You know, it is pretty easy to get around that. You could boot into target disk mode and remove that file. But, you know, ultimately it's about time. You're slowing down somebody, and, you know, the witty high schoolers or whoever you're dealing with aren't probably going to figure that out. Or it'll take them a while to figure that out.
It goes on YouTube.
Yeah, well, don't watch this. But, I mean, honestly, if you set that, you would have to have another machine to boot it into target disk mode and remove that file, and it would just, it would take too long to have it be worth doing. So, you know, that's single user mode. There's a whole lot of other stuff that we can, you know, look into. I don't really have time to talk about all of these things today that you can do with security. You know, with profiles and local MCX, we can say applications are not allowed to be opened from the home folder, which is something that should definitely be set if you want a very secure environment. It's going to infuriate many users that want to download, you know, Skype, Spotify. You know, that's a whole other issue with its P2P. But it's something you can do with profiles and local MCX or MCX. You know, the firewall is disabled by default in OS 10. Turn it on. Have good password requirements. You know, I was talking about that yesterday in the boot camp, but you know, don't just set arbitrary password requirements. And because if they're really crazy, your users are just going to write it down on a Post-it and put it right on the monitor. If you make it, you know, they have to have a long password, but it doesn't have to have all these crazy symbols and everything, then they'll probably remember it. You know, location services is something that's very important in security. Whether you know, you might want to have it disabled because you don't want your machines to be tracked, and that's something at the system level, or maybe you do want it on if you want to track your machines. You know, security logging. If the machine boots into single user mode, maybe you want it to generate an email and say, hey, this machine booted into single user mode. Maybe you should go check out who was using it at that time. Having an application inventory with something like Monkey Web Admin, or, you know, countless other tools just to know what's on your machines. The security command, which is somewhat recent into OS 10, and is how you now install certificates into the root keychain, add trust, set up FileVault. Everything with the security command is very great. You know, certificates, keychains, iCloud, whether you want to disable those features or not, and then 802.1x with network authentication. There's just so many other things that you know, can be looked into. So, in conclusion, security on the Mac, especially on local Macs, is very important, and with the Mac being such a secure platform, when we put these insecure applications, whether it be Flash or Acrobat or Java onto them, we want to make sure that they remain secure. Throw on some antivirus, and don't give your users admin rights. It's very easy to just create this group, give them the things that they need, and keep other things locked down. You know, I'm going to have some notes at this link. Probably won't work until a little bit later because I couldn't actually click post. I don't want to mention the Wi-Fi 3 times, but I am. There will be full notes and everything up on AFP 548. I wanted to leave, you know, a good amount of time for questions. You know, anything you have right here.
When you set up the groups for the users, how will you set up for, let's say, I don't want to like go each time and add a specific user, so like network, let's say AP users.
Yeah, you can add groups to groups. This was just in that example because I only had 3 users in that machine. But you can add Active Directory groups to other groups. I would not put Active Directory groups directly into Etsy authorization because it may or may not work. But nesting those groups usually does. Sometimes it will stop working if you are off the network. But you can use LaunchD to automatically add each individual Active Directory user to that group or something like that to have it work. Yep.
As far as single user mode goes, how is FileVault 2 as far as use that?
FileVault 2 does disable single user mode. It does just inherently do that. But again, with it being, it's not quite enterprise friendly yet. It's starting to be, but it's really hard to manage it. You can use something like Crypt, but it's not the most enterprise friendly product yet. So, especially if you're looking at lab machines where you're going to have the kind of people, you know, whether it be students or just a ton of users going through that are going to be the ones that are more likely to try and get into single user mode, I think these kind of applications are good. But you could layer on a firmware password, FileVault, and do the root profile thing, and you'll probably be pretty set then. All the way in the back, standing up. You won't be able to get into the recovery partition. No. Or netboot or anything. You'll just be able to boot into the main default operating system. Yeah, all the way standing up.
What would be the recommended security procedure for something like that on Windows desktop, where you have a lab and you'd like to have certain users being able to remote control the machine that you wouldn't want anyone else to? I've tried doing things like the nested groups, like putting the Active Directory group into an Open Directory group, and then using some of the genetic groups, but it's not quite working right. There has to be an easier way to use it.
For ARD, you would want to use the kickstart command, and you can add multiple users. You can do this manually through the sharing pane, but that's a real pain. So I would do it through the kickstart command. There's some articles. I'll put some up in here. Yeah, there's a group for it too, but. Yeah. It's all groups really, so. Yeah.
I know that you can, lost train of thought, but basically there are some articles there, there are some articles out there that will help you to embed AD groups into ARD. Basically make it a little easier. And then all you have to do is just set the particular preferences for that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So there's a sharing preference that I was hoping to be able to set, and if you or this room can't do it, I give up. It's never going to happen. Being able to share scanners requires admin authentication. If we switch user and leave an admin logged in behind the scenes all the time, it's only active when their profile is facing front. And it doesn't follow the user if I use network profiles. It stays local to that machine. How can I keep a scanner shared or let any user that comes in the machines share a scanner?
I'm going to guess that there's something for that in Etsy authorization. It might even be the printing, because a lot of the printing and the scanning goes to the same thing, but I've never done something like that. So I would buy a real network scanner at that point, honestly. Yep.
How likely is it that an OS update is going to override Etsy authorization?
In the past, it hasn't. But what OS updates have done is added things to Etsy authorization, as well as changed some of the activity. For example, I have some of these where you need a couple additional things now, like to run software update, it needs a couple keys now. But really, it hasn't, Etsy authorization hasn't changed or really been changed by OS upgrades. A lot of it stayed exactly the same for a decade at this point. So I think it's a very reliable way to change the rights on a machine. Yep.
Could you describe a way how you do logging and then some email something like that?
Well, you can use the built-in mail commands and hit an SMTP server and do things like that. I can't really go into it and go through all the mail commands, but what you would really want is you need a mail server that your machine can reach, whether it be an internal one or something like that, and just have it be part of the command. For single user mode, you could do something like that. You can also, there are products and there are some free solutions that will watch logs, and if certain things pop up, it'll alert you. But there's all kinds of ways to do that. If you just want single off things, like if someone goes into single user mode, you could just throw a key, and you may not have network access in single user mode, so you can have it go through and send that email once it boots back to, normal mode, but there's all kinds of ways to do it. So what you can do is add groups to the LP admin group. So we can add like the power users group to the LP admin group, and then they'll be able to add printers. It's all just nested groups, and if you did something like that, a student account wouldn't be able to hit that, but in the example, the teacher account would be able to. You would just do the same dsedit group command, like the same command that we use to add the admin group to the power users group. You would just replace power users with LP admin, and then admin with power users, and then they would just become part of that group. Yep.
With what operating system did you start to do this, and how long have you been using Etsy authorization?
I've been using Etsy authorization. I first did some modifications to it. I want to say back in Leopard or Tiger maybe, but I started actually, giving users, permissions to do things through it and everything like that in Snow Leopard. And pretty much everything's remained constant. Apple adds new keys to it. There's new keys to it in Mountain Lion, and some have changed, but really most of it has stayed the same. Like that App Store software one is obviously new. Yeah.
You're going to post this slide there?
Yeah, everything will be up on AFP 548. Yeah.
So our students and teachers run non-admin users. Occasionally, when they try to eject a SD card or CD or DVD, they get prompted for admin credentials.
That would likely be files in use on that external drive by an admin user, which you may not be able to get around. I personally have. I'm not sure.
Yeah, me too.
With a new image of an MP3, and there's nothing open.
It may be a bug. I haven't run into that personally, so I can't say.
So is it possible then maybe do like a set UID on this mounter so that it can just push it out?
Perhaps. I haven't done anything with it, so I can't say.
The vector reads that if you're using an 10.7 authorization file and you just copy that setting and put that on 10.8 and you walk around that file, or walk on that specific command for that so you just want to do a good
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. If you're going to be making these changes, don't just copy an Etsy authorization file on top of something. Use plist buddy and make the commands to the file that's there, that's Apple provided, because it's going to have everything there. That's good. Yeah, right here in the front.
With the time and date zone example you had, to enable the sort of automatic time zone shifting on maybe a laptop, are there some higher location services authorization files?
Yeah, it needs location services enabled. That's actually kind of it's not through MCX. It's I can't remember exactly where it is off the top of my head, but you can enable location services just through a script, and then have that work. And then just enabling location services won't have location services work for everything. It will work for the date and time, but you would then need to individually add like Safari or whatever else you wanted to be able to use it. But yeah, the location services does need to be enabled for that to work.
And I was just going to say, if you're concerned about an OS update changing your Etsy authorization file modifications, you might consider managing it with Puppet, which has a native Mac authorization provider to manage that.
Yeah, Puppet will work great. You can do like a no package through Monkey and configure it that way, but Puppet is perfect for that kind of thing.
You touched briefly on turn on the firewall. So,
Yeah.
You indicate, is that do you have any further comments? Is that the application level firewall or the various other firewalls? So that they can get that over different OSs?
Well, it's just the main firewall. I mean, there's nothing that's really open by default, but that's just an example of something being disabled by the default settings. Maybe not being the most secure thing, but just enabling that, you probably won't run into very many issues.
The application level firewall.
Yeah. Yep.
So we have some admins that need to stay admins, but we want to block one thing like sharing. Would you think that this method would be good to escalate our management profile to a group that they're not a part of, or is that kind of a whole other kind of one?
Well, if they're going to be admins, if you modify if they can, modify Etsy authorization, but you could mark the sharing panel as accessible to nobody, or you could set it with a profile to be invisible. But I mean, ultimately, if you have admin rights, you can do whatever you want. So you could make, a power users group and give them access to everything except for that. But if they can install a package, they could just, you can make a payload-free package, and that has root access and gives them access to that all again. So, you have to look at the individual rights and what their true implications are. Because, just off the bat, you say, oh, installing a package, they'll be able to install Office updates or something like that, and that's not an issue. But they can install a lot of things that revert everything back to the way they are. And that could be malicious users. It could be anything. Well, Office updates are just straight packages. So you would either need to have that right enabled or have them go through some kind of managed client, whether it be Monkey, Casper, Absolute Manage. Those will all work for it. Again, I personally use Monkey, and it works great for that kind of thing. But there's no key you can set to say, allow all users to install Office updates. You can allow all users to install Apple updates, but, just any other package, it's not going to work.
On that thread there is a default where you can turn off the prompt for them to update.
Yeah.
That bought me a lot of time.
Yeah. Well, there have been quite a few Office for Mac updates that are security updates, so I would advise against I would.
I'm going to catch up.
Yeah.
And hurt the cat and push it myself.
Yeah, but I mean that's a perfect example of something that you can use Profiles or MCX for, is disabling update prompts or disabling update checks, because that's a lot of the time when users will get that prompt and then they come bother you. But if you manage that software through one of those clients, then you're in a good place. Yeah. There will be a link in here, and honestly, the best way I find to go through Etsy authorization is just to open up the actual file, and that comment field, the comment fields in there are very descriptive, and they'll tell you what they are. A lot of them, it might need an additional key, but that's the best place to go. Especially, you could search for, sharing or network, and you'll find it, and it's right there. There are posts online, obviously, because people do this, but especially with the more bleeding edge, like App Store stuff, there might not be a lot of posts on it. So just search Etsy authorization. Just don't edit it without, making a backup first. And if you edit it in Text Wrangler or BBEdit, it will change the permissions, so make sure you change them back to root wheel.
On the other extreme, you have an extreme environment where you have developers that need to stop services, daemons, processes. Where do you draw the line where you limit what they have access to and give them full admin?
I would say for developers, I probably wouldn't give them admin rights on their work machine. I would say, do all that stuff in a virtual machine. Because if you're starting and stopping, daemons and stuff like that, you might just break everything. And on your actual work machine, don't do that. That's what lab environments, that's what virtual machines are for. If you need users to be able to run Xcode, you can add them to the developer group, and then they can do that kind of stuff. But, other than that, I wouldn't have developers doing that stuff on their main machine that they're using for email and everything like that. But, anything else? Yeah.
So when you're controlling the single user mode,
yeah.
locking it down, you're using VM. Is that at the main system level, or could somebody factor it in via a VM?
No, that's just on the virtual machine. You couldn't backdoor through that. I just showed it that way because I didn't want to have to reboot my actual machine. And likewise, that's why I didn't show setting a firmware password. But because you can't set a firmware password on a virtual machine. But testing this stuff, Fusion works pretty well, except for single user mode exiting for some reason. It won't do it if you're in full screen. I haven't figured out why yet. We got 6 minutes left. Yeah.
Totally screw up Etsy authorization. Can you delete the file or read it?
No. Yeah, you could try that on your machine, but if you totally screw up Etsy authorization, which you shouldn't only be messing it up on a virtual machine or something where you can easily restore to a previous state. I would, boot into target disk mode, and copy over an etc authorization that's from the same version of the operating system. Like if you copy one over from 10.6 onto 10.8, it's going to break a lot of things. Yeah. Anybody want to talk about anything else? Yep. Nick?
I know you mentioned it earlier during the boot camp, but what about two-factor authentication? Is that like a huge can of worms not worth opening, or is that kind of actually relatively straightforward?
Well, it is a huge can of worms. It's definitely worth looking into, especially if you have very important data. On the Windows side, there's been a lot of smart card stuff for a long time. And there has been on the Mac too. Apple took out smart card services in 10.7, and that was for a reason, because of some security problems with it. There are still third-party solutions for that. If you want smart cards, or there's Active Directory plugins for two-factor authentication. But it's definitely worth looking into. On the Mac, it's not the simplest thing to set up, but with Apple IDs and everything, it certainly seems like it's coming there. We have 4 minutes. Come on. Yeah.
You polled us on if we run as local admins. What would you suggest we change?
Oh yeah. So I would say you shouldn't run as a local admin, because if you run as a local admin, you will not know what problems your actual users are running into. For example, with Apple Remote Desktop, the older version that was the box version, if you open it and enter a serial number as a standard user, it'll open. But because it doesn't have access to where the serial number gets stored in the system, it won't actually store it anywhere, so you have to enter it every single time you open ARD, which is really fun. So, it's issues like that where you should know what your users are running into, because you yourself are a user of the system. And if you're going to install something, install it through your managed client, and act like a user so you know what they face. Ultimately, our jobs are to help people, and if you put yourself in their shoes, it's going to make it a lot easier to do that. 3 minutes, or you want to get out early? In the back. Yes. No, because of the we did that if command. It does if it's a VT100 terminal, then it won't do that. Sorry. So that if command makes sure that doesn't happen, because the terminal of the terminal of terminal.app is not VT100, nor is SSH, so it's not going to do that. So that's a protection there. All right. One more. All right.
Just a comment on the firmware password over the 9.5, we actually verified the firmware password is what we set it to.
Yeah, that's a good thing to do. That would be something that logging would help a lot with, because someone could yank the memory out, wipe the firmware password, set a new firmware password, and then you never know if you weren't doing that. That's more of an advanced thing that might be hard to get into, but that's something good. All right, I think that's it.